Continuing on, exaggeration in religious matters. The Prophet ﷺ entered the masjid. He entered the mosque and he saw that there was a rope hanging between two pillars. So think about that. There's a rope, there's two pillars inside the masjid, and there's a rope like kind of tied to the two pillars. And he saw that there was a rope hanging. Now the Prophet ﷺ, he asked, so what is this rope? Now what is this rope doing here in the middle of the masjid? So somebody responded, this rope belongs to Zainab. When Zainab is tired, when she gets tired, this should be a G. She hangs on to it. Okay? She hangs on to it. The Prophet ﷺ said, no, remove it. You should pray as long as you have the energy for it. When you are tired, you should sleep. Here's the question. Who is Zainab? The Prophet's wife. Right? Okay? So Zainab, okay, is there. Zainab used to pray so much that she would get tired, and she would get so tired that she would be hanging on a rope, and she would put up a rope and she would be hanging on the rope while praying because she could barely stand. This shows you what kind of women were there in Medina, man. What kind of people were there. You know, when we talk about like dedication to Islam, it's not just the men. This is what you call dedication to Islam. But the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't approve of this. He said, this is too far. This is too much, right? Bring the rope down. This rope shouldn't be in the masjid. Don't hang on a rope while you're praying. If you're so tired, what should you do? When you're tired, you should sleep. When you get tired, you should sleep. So Zainab was one of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, okay, and she had accepted Islam, and they got married. So this shows you that one interesting thing is that women used to pray inside the masjid. That's a fact now, by the way. Women used to pray in the masjid at that point in time, and they used to even take over certain sections of the masjid by hanging their rope between the two pillars. It shows you an example, right? But the important thing is that why is the Prophet ﷺ telling her not to do this, right? You should pray as long as you have the energy for prayer. What is the reason for that? Number one, you won't be consistent if you keep this up. Because what's going to happen, if you pray and you're so tired and you're exhausted and everything, do you think you can keep that up night after night? You're going to collapse and you're not going to be able to pray the next day. You're going to sleep like the entire morning. So this is not the point. So this is not going to be consistent. And we saw the hadith about consistency, number one. Number two, you're going to ignore other things. If you put, if you put all your energy in this, you have zero energy and you're just dead for the rest of the day. You're ignoring everything else that you're supposed to be doing in the daytime. All the tasks that you have, other things you have to do, you're ignoring them. This is not balance, right? So the same thing, this is another hadith about exaggeration, about balance. And again, how many of you have actually met someone who's ever tried to hang from a rope because they were so tired yet they still wanted to pray? Not likely you're ever to meet one of them, right? So remember, be careful when you apply an analogy and start using this against someone who's praying like an hour or something like that, because it's not the same thing. Okay, any questions on that? Well, they didn't really have chairs at that time, right? But she wanted to stand. The whole point was she wanted to stand. Maybe she probably had a rope like this. She was probably hanging on the rope like this with her hands, and then like holding on, like she's not leaning or something like that. However they leaned, or there was. I mean, I've actually heard of people who have similar examples. There's a group of scholars in India. They narrate that there's actually one school in India where they study so much, they read so much that when it's time to review for their final exam, don't do this by the way, they actually have a rope tied against the wall and they tie the rope around their neck, okay? And they're studying and they're studying. If they fall asleep and they get tired, literally they choke and they'll wake up and they'll start studying again. Hardcore, right? Maybe a little bit too hardcore, So the thing is you have to be balanced. But there are some people who do that. So if you had this idea, something like this, maybe this is not the best example of balance. Maybe you should sleep, and maybe you should have studied since the beginning of class rather than cramming for the final, right? That's what students do as well. So this is not a good example. All right, the Prophet ﷺ said, we'll repeat this one. Inna dina yusr. وَلَن يُشَادَّ الدِّينَ أَحَدٌ إِلَّا غَلَبَ فَسَدِّدُوا وَقَارِبُوا وَأَبْشِرُوا. Prophet ﷺ said, this religion is easy. This inna dina yusr. The religion is easy. Which religion? Islam. So he's saying it's yusr, it's easy. Anyone who makes the religion too hard on himself will find that it overpowers him. So if you make Islam too hard on you, it's going to overpower you. So then the Prophet ﷺ said, so aim for what is right, aim for what is correct, follow a middle path, and accept the good news. What is the good news? Meaning accept the good news that you're going to get rewarded for all the good deeds that you do. So take the good news, because what happens, people who are doing so much worship, they're not accepting the good news. They're like, you know what, my good deeds are not going to count. I don't have enough good deeds for me. I need to do more and more and more, and that's when they go too crazy. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ is saying, the religion is easy, first of all. What does it mean that the religion is easy? A lot of people, again, misquote this hadith. You know, they see something, you know what, somebody's, you know, praying extra. Akhi, don't you know the hadith? Ad-deen yusr. You know, why are you praying so much? And someone's fasting on a Monday. Inna ad-deen yusr. Don't you know this is a hadith narrated by Imam Bukhari? It's authentic. So it's not about whether it's authentic or not. It's whether you understood it correctly or not. So what does it actually mean? It means that this religion is not overburdening on people given their human capacity. Meaning what Allah is asking you to do in Islam is not going to overburden you so much that you can't function in daily life. Like we talked about the ideal, right? The ideal in Catholicism, the ideal in Buddhism is not something that's actually fully attainable. It's not something that people can really get to. It's not a balanced ideal. It's not an easy thing to, you know, become a beggar and give up all your possessions, or to never get married, or to never engage in any type of, pleasures or anything like that. This is something that's really, it's not easy. That's actually intrinsically difficult for the average human being. So it's not at the same level. All right? So Islam, in this sense, is not too overburdening. People can handle it. It's not that difficult. And then he said, whoever makes the religion too hard on himself. Now, how would you make it too hard on yourself? Such that your body and your mind cannot even endure this anymore. You keep on doing so much that you can't take it anymore. That means you made it too hard on yourself. Okay? It doesn't mean that, you know what, you followed the opinion where, you're gonna wash, your feet in between the toe. I mean, I don't know. So something where you're doing like some little tiny extra thing, you know. That's not considered to be something that is overpowering you or making it too hard on you. Like for example, some people, I'll just give you an example from my personal experience, so I don't pick on anybody else. You know, one day I went to a masjid, and after giving the khutbah, someone told me that, you know what, because it's raining, it was like sprinkling basically, because it's sprinkling, you have to combine the Asr prayer with the Jummah prayer. Okay? I said, okay, this is an opinion that some scholars have taken when it's raining hard, not like the few drops that we've experienced anyways, but they started coming and they started quoting this hadith to me. And literally the guy just read this hadith off. He's like, do you know where this hadith is? I'm like, yeah, it's in Bukhari. He's like, it's in Bukhari, exactly. So, and he started going off, and we got into this whole thing about, why are you making life difficult on you? You're not supposed to make life difficult. I said, it's not difficult for me to go, back to work, and then at 4 o'clock to pray Asr at work. I'm not even going to come to the masjid. I'm going to pray at work even. And he said, no, you're making life difficult, and it's not right what you're doing and all of that. It's a misunderstanding. This doesn't mean that you're making life too hard on you, that you have to combine prayers because of some rain or something like that. That's an opinion. Whoever wanted to take that opinion, that's fine. And even though I'm at work, I'm going to lift up my foot, because alhamdulillah, I'm flexible enough. I'm going to put it in the sink, and I'm going to wash my feet. Say, why are you making the religion so difficult? Say, first of all, I didn't ask you to put your foot in the sink. Okay? I'm putting my foot in the sink. Why do you have a problem with it? But sometimes people will misunderstand it. So, too hard doesn't mean these little things that we do on a daily basis. Too hard means that you do so much that literally you're not going to be able to take it anymore. That's what the difference between easy and hard is. We have to define what is easy and what is hard, such that it overpowers you, meaning you're not going to be able to keep this up. You cannot keep this up if you keep on doing whatever you're doing for a very long time. So then he said, so aim for what is right. What is right? It's defined. What is defined by Allah is what is correct, what is right. And then he said, follow a middle path, meaning give priority to both your body and your soul. You have, a balance that you need, and accept the good news that you will get full reward for without having to give up all the aspects of your life. You're going to get full reward for that. So that's pretty much exaggeration in religious matters here. Any questions on this? It depends on how much pain, really. So it depends. So like, let's say your foot hurts a little bit. You could sit down, you could stand up, and there's a little bit pain. If you stand up and it's not gonna mess up your leg, it's not gonna mess you up, you feel a little bit pain or something, inshallah you get more reward for doing that. But if you're like really gonna be in pain and now your foot is gonna get messed up and stuff like that, then you shouldn't do that. It's not the ideal. It's not the ideal. And if it would really, really mess you up, then it's wrong for you to do it. Then it's wrong for you. Like for example, if you were gonna fast, like one of the sisters she mentioned today, right? So if you were gonna fast and if you know your child's life is in danger and you still fast anyways, that's wrong to do that. Even though you say, no, but it's more pious and inshallah the child might be okay, that's not right. If you knew that for a fact, then yeah, you should not do that. And it would be wrong for you to do that. Next one. The Prophet ﷺ said, do not go to excess in praising me as the Christians went to excess about the son of Maryam. Who is the son of Maryam, the son of Mary? Jesus, my Prophet Isa. Said, I am only his servant, so say, his servant and his messenger. Meaning the Prophet ﷺ said, I'm only his servant, so when you say my name, or when you mention me, or you're trying to praise me, say, Abdullahi wa Rasuluh. That the Prophet is the servant of Allah and he's the messenger of Allah. Don't use like too high words, because that's what got people started worshiping Jesus. That's how they kind of started. So this is about excess even in praising the Prophet ﷺ, who's the person who deserves to be the human being that deserves to be praised the most that ever lived is the Prophet. But he's saying, don't even exaggerate when you're praising me. Be careful of that, because that can also lead to problems. So be careful of that as well. So how can it lead to excess? They went to excess in praising Prophet Isa, because they actually began to equate the Prophet Isa with Allah in certain ways because of their praising. So don't do that. The reason why Prophet Isa is known as the son of Mary, and it's referred to so many times in the Quran as the son of Mary, to refute the idea that he's the son of God. So to make it very clear, if you're the son of Mary, you can't be the son of God unless you believe that Mary will somehow marry to God or something like that. So it kind of redefines in people's minds. They're so used to hearing son of God, and they forget, did it mean metaphorical or did it mean actual? And most Christians think it's actual, not metaphorical, because technically Adam was the son of God. And other prophets in the Bible are mentioned as being the son of God as well. But then they say, no, those are metaphorical. But Jesus is the actual son of God. So this helps redefine, basically in their own mind, what he really is. And it says, only say, I'm his servant and his messenger. What is a servant? Servant is actually a title of respect. So a servant or slave, when you're talking about being a slave of Allah, is actually a title of respect, but it's a title of humility at the same time. So the thing is, someone who's not familiar with this, they would say, if the Prophet said, when you're praising me, don't praise me too high, but use words like servant of Allah and his messenger. Now his messenger of Allah, we understand. How can the servant of Allah be a word of praise? Actually, it is a praiseworthy thing. Although it's humility in respect to Allah, being a servant of Allah means that you're close to Allah. And being close to Allah is a praise. So that's something that people don't understand. And then we can talk a lot more about the idea of servant of Allah, but we'll stop there, inshallah. Any questions on this? Okay. Next hadith. Every Muslim should give. Now we're talking about spending for the sake of Allah. These are ahadith which motivate you to spend for the sake of Allah. Every Muslim should give charity. Doesn't matter how much you have. Every Muslim should give charity. So somebody asked the question, what about someone who has nothing to give? I don't have any money. I have no possessions, I have nothing. What about that? The Prophet ﷺ said he should go and get some work, earn something, and then give in charity. Can you imagine? Even if you have nothing, go work and go get something just so you can give it in charity. Not so that you can fulfill your own needs. The Prophet ﷺ responding, go and work and then give something in charity. He said, what if the person can't? I mean, what if you can't work? He said, then you should at least help someone who is troubled by some need. Someone who is in need, go and help them. He said, what if he can't even do that? He's one of those guys who just keeps on asking, you know. So what if he can't do that? He said he should command what is right or what is good, meaning encourage other people to do good things. He said, what if he doesn't do that? And he said he should at least refrain from evil. If he's not even going to do that, at least he shouldn't do anything wrong, and that will count as a charity for him. So this is one of those guys who's just trying to ask every single detail. But the thing is, if you look at it, the Prophet ﷺ saying is that even if you don't have any money, go find some work and go give something in charity. This shows you the importance of giving in charity, and it shows you the importance of work as well at the same time. Helping someone is also an act of charity. Enjoining the good, meaning encouraging somebody to do something good, is another act of charity. And he just put the last thing, because the guy kept on asking. He said, what if I don't even do that? He said, you know what, just you staying away from doing something bad to somebody else, that's an act of charity as well. You had the potential to yell at someone, to scream at someone, to throw something, to spit on them, whatever it is. You stopped yourself from doing that, that'll count as an act of charity as well. So just keep yourself away from doing something bad, that will even count as well. You didn't even do anything, but you suppress your desires, therefore you get an act of charity for it. Okay, any questions on that? It's clear, right? Okay, again, spending for the sake of Allah. Somebody came and asked, Messenger of Allah, which charity has the greatest reward? Very good question. He said that you give charity while you are healthy, yet in need, in a state of poverty and trying to acquire wealth. So meaning, you give charity when you actually are really needy, you don't have very much money. And then he said, do not put it off until you are close to death. And then you say, this person gets this much, and that person gets that much, when it already belongs to someone else. Now you have to read this a few times. Right? What is he talking about, right? First of all, let's talk about the first part of the hadith. The first part of the hadith says, the most rewarding charity is when you're giving, when you actually don't have that much wealth yourself. Usually what people do is they keep waiting charity. They say, once we get more, then we'll go ahead and give. And then if we get more than that, then we'll go ahead and give some more. The best type of charity is to give when you don't have that much to give in the first place. Because the percentage works out, right? Someone has $10,000 and they give $100 in charity. Someone has $1,000 and they give $100 in charity. One person has given 10% of their wealth, and the other person has given what percent of their wealth? 1% of their wealth, right? World of difference. So it's not just the amount only. It's also the fact that how much proportion you've given. Allah has given you this much, you gave this much in charity. So those people who are billionaires, and they're like, oh, he just donated $1 million to that children's fund. That's great, but he's a billionaire, right? It's nothing. That's like a chump change. It probably fell out of his pocket on the side. That's nothing to be proud of, right? But people get proud of the numbers or something like that. That's not the way it is. Although, if you have a lot of money and you give 10%, and you have less money and you give 10%, the person who had more money and gave the same percentage gets more reward. Why? Because the temptation when you have all that money is greater than when you have a smaller amount of money. That's the only reason why it could be a little bit greater, depending on the intention and the circumstances and all of those things. Now the second thing is, he says, do not put off your charity until you're closer to death. You say, I'll give charity later, I'll give charity later. And then all those old people, they're like ready to, write down in their will, I'm going to go ahead and give to this organization and give to this organization. This is what a lot of people do. They leave off their charity until they're later on in life, and then they go, I'm going to leave my money to this organization and that, or bequest to different organizations. He says, don't put off charity until you're closer to death. And then you say, this person gets this much, that person gets that much, meaning you're writing up your will. You're writing your will, your inheritance, and your bequest, what's known as wasiyah. this Islamic organization will get this, and Islamic Relief will get this much, and Zakat Foundation of America will get this much, and the masjid will get this much. He says, don't do that when it already belongs to somebody else. What does he mean by that? He already belongs to someone else, meaning your wealth is not going to belong to, you're almost dead. Your wealth is almost gone, and you know it's going to be gone in a matter of time, small matter of time. It already belongs to someone else, meaning you're not going to recover. You're already very old, or you're sick, or you're dying on your deathbed, and then you start talking about, I'm going to give charity to this cause, I'm going to give charity to that cause. The Prophet ﷺ is actually making fun of that person. You had all that time to give in charity. You had all that lifespan to give in charity. And now when you're about to die and you know you're on your deathbed, that's when you start distributing it. He said it doesn't even belong to you anymore. Now technically it belongs to you, right? It means that within a month or within a few days, it's not going to belong to you anyways because you're dead. So it already belongs to somebody else. It belongs to the people who are inheriting from you. It belongs to the people who you had put before in your wasiyah and all of that. So basically he's saying, don't hold off charity until you're near death. Do it earlier in life, because doing it later on, it's like it already belongs to somebody else. So it's not going to get the same reward. You should still do it, but you're not going to get the same reward as you did had you waited. Okay, any questions on this one? Okay, next one. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, a man said, I must give some charity. So there was a man in one of the previous generations. He said, I need to go and give some charity. So he went out, he put his money in the hand of a thief. Imagine, he put his money in the hand of a thief. The next day the people found out what this man had done, and they told him, they said, you know, you actually gave charity to a thief. You didn't even realize it. So what did the man do? The man said, you know, oh Allah, subhanAllah, oh Allah, may you be praised. I'm going to give charity again. So he says, I give charity to a thief. I'm going to go ahead and give charity again. So he went out this time, and he put the charity in the hand of a prostitute. Oh, he's like, this guy's got really bad fortune. You know, he's really bad at picking people to give. This guy decided, I'm going to give charity for the sake of Allah. So he just goes out at night, one night, and he just sees the first person. Okay, this person needs charity. The first guy he gave it to a thief. And they go, this guy, man, he gave it to a thief. So he said, okay, I'm going to give it again. Next day he goes, and okay, who can I give it to? Okay, she looks poor. He give it to her. Find out the next day she was a prostitute. You gave it to the prostitute. The next day the people told him, you know what? You gave it to a prostitute. So then he said, oh Allah, may you be praised. You know, I gave it to a prostitute. I'm going to give some more charity. So he's trying to make up for it. And he said, he went out this time and he put it in the hand of a rich man. So there was like some rich guy walking, maybe he wasn't wearing nice clothes, he didn't take care of himself or something. He's like, oh, that guy looks poor, and he goes and gives it. The guy's really rich. The guy's really. So the next day, the people told him, you had given it to someone wealthy. You gave it to a wealthy man. They're probably thinking, what's wrong with this guy? So then he said, oh Allah, may you be praised. I have given charity to a thief, to a prostitute, and to a rich man. I mean, he's making dua, oh Allah, I'm trying to give charity, but it keeps going to these wrong people. What do I do? And the guy's trying to be sincere. Then someone came to him, okay? Somebody came to him, which was probably a prophet of a previous generation. And he said, your charity to a thief might make him stop stealing, might make him stop from being a thief. What you gave to the prostitute might make her change her ways. And what you gave to the rich man might make him reflect so that he will spend from what Allah has given him. So imagine someone were to give charity to a thief. Maybe the thief will start thinking, you know what? I can't believe someone gave me charity. I'm stealing and this and that. I should stop doing this. They might feel embarrassed. The prostitute might feel embarrassed. Somebody came and gave me charity. This is what they view me as. This is what I really have become. I didn't grow up like my childhood dream was not to become like this. So she might reflect as well. And the rich man, he might think, you know what, man, he has so much money, I could at least get some better clothes and not look like a homeless person, right? Because the guy thought that he was poor, so you couldn't tell the difference. The guy will start spending something of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has actually given him. So what does this encourage us to do? It encourages us to show that spending for the sake of Allah is something great even if you give it to the wrong person, accidentally, not realizing the charity is so powerful, it might still have an effect on that other person, even though they're not deserving, and make them stop doing something wrong. So charity has that kind of power. So it encourages us to give more for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any questions? Okay, next hadith. We'll repeat this one. ما نقصت صدقة من مال. The Prophet ﷺ said, charity does not decrease wealth in any way. Charity does not decrease your wealth. Now look, in reality, right? In reality, from our perspective, if you give charity, you have less money in your pocket. Your bank account balance has gone down. But now the Prophet ﷺ is saying, if you look at the whole scheme of things, charity is not reducing your wealth. Because your wealth is not just the amount of cash you have in the bank or whatever it is, it's the amount of benefit you can actually, get from that. And Allah is going to put more barakah, He's going to put more blessing in your wealth, number one. And number two, you're actually gaining so much reward that you're going to be paid back by Allah. So you're getting a loan from Allah. It's like giving a loan. You have a debt. You're going to collect that on the Day of Judgment. So technically, people need to stop thinking that charity brings their wealth down. So he's trying to redefine. Because everyone, why do people not give charity? We're all guilty of this. Every one of us is guilty of this. We hesitate from giving in charity because our money is going to go down. We're thinking, but we have this expense and we have that expense. But now if you change this and you say, you know what? Actually your wealth does not go down. Sadaqah, charity does not make your wealth go down. If you actually internalize this 100%, then people will realize that, you know what? They'll stop thinking that, you know what? I'm not going to give charity because of such and such reason. It changes people's mentality. The whole mindset changes. So this is a very important hadith about spending for the sake of Allah. Any questions? You have to find the balance yourself. You have to find the balance in the culture that you live, and you have to kind of have to test yourself. You have to know yourself. You really have to know yourself and figure out whether or not you're being wise for saving, or whether or not you're being miserly and not wanting to spend your wealth. Inshallah, we'll cover it more in detail in the next class, in purification of the soul. We're going to cover it in detail about how you can test yourself. Okay, inshallah. Next hadith. The Prophet ﷺ asked, which of you loves the property of his heir more than he loves his own property? What is heir? It's someone who's going to inherit from you, right? Like a children or cousins or close cousins or whatever it is. So which one of you loves the property of his heir more than he loves his own property? They responded, Messenger of Allah, there's no one who wouldn't love his own property more. Of course, you love what you own rather than what your children or your cousins or your parents or your grandfather or somebody owns. So then he said, his property is what he sends ahead. Meaning your property is what you send ahead, and the property of his heir is what he leaves behind. Okay? Now, pay attention to the words and you'll understand. So first of all, the Prophet ﷺ asked the question, which of you, right? Which of you thinks this? He's trying to teach them a lesson by asking them a question, and this was his way of teaching. Number two, he says, everyone was very honest. There's nobody, everyone loves their own property. The companions were very honest with the Prophet. They wouldn't pretend. Like, oh no, Messenger of Allah, we love to give in charity, No, they would be open. He asked them a question, which one of you loves, do you love your children's property or do you love your own property? Of course, we love our own property, Messenger of Allah. They're being honest. And he said, your property, he's trying to redefine the concept. Your real property, right? Your real wealth is what? It's what you send ahead. Meaning what you give in charity is what you send ahead with Allah to be recollected on the Day of Judgment. And the property of your heir, meaning whatever gets inherited to your children, is what you're leaving behind. Right? It's what you're leaving behind. So technically, what is your property? Right? Your property is what you've given in charity. The rest of it, it already belongs to the children. It already belongs to the other people because they're going to inherit it. It's just a way of convincing people that they should give more in charity and they should not be stingy about giving in charity. Okay? Questions? So understand what these words mean, because if they come on the test and look, if you were to give this last sentence to an average person, and you give it to them in English or Arabic, whatever, right? And you say, explain the last sentence of this hadith. Some people would not be able to figure it out, right? But now that you know the interpretation, you're able to figure it out. So in case this gets asked on the test, you may be asked a question like, what does this part of the hadith mean? You have to know what it means. Just a little hint, dropping a hint here and there, okay? Next hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, O son of Adam, it is better for you to spend what is in excess of your needs and worse for you to keep it. You will not be blamed for keeping enough to cover your needs. Begin with your immediate dependence. The giving hand is better than the receiving hand. I think this might be Hadith Qudsi actually. I'll double check it. It says, it's better for you to spend what is in excess of your needs, and it's worse for you to keep it. So you calculate what are your needs, what is your, what is your needs in terms of not just what you need now, what you need for like the near future, immediate future, and you know that you're gonna, you'll be able to get money from somewhere else. So it's better if you spend what is in excess. So you have a big savings or something like that, and you're not planning on doing anything with it, it's better to spend that. You will not be blamed, however, for keeping enough to cover your needs. Whatever your needs are, you keep some extra money to cover your necessary expenses, you won't be blamed for that. This is balanced. And then he said, وَالْيَدُ الْعُلْيَا خَيْرٌ مِنَ الْيَدِ السُّفْلَى. The upper hand is greater than the lower hand. And I translated here for you so that you understand. What is the upper hand and what is the lower hand? Right? When you're generally, if you think of like, societies where there are people who are begging, how do people beg? Do they beg like this? Do they beg like this? Or do they beg like this? Like this, right? So what is this? This is the lower hand. And when people are giving and they're begging like this, they're giving the money with the upper hand. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying what? The upper hand is better than the lower hand. Meaning the giving hand is better than the receiving one. It's better that you give in charity than you receive. So giving in charity is something better, right? So here's the balance. The balance is that you can keep enough that you need, but you shouldn't keep so much excessive wealth. And you should try to spend that in charity. Okay? Any questions on that? When it says upper hand and lower hand, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're giving in that form. You can secretly give the money. In terms of, by giving so much, you fall into arrogance. That is a danger there, that's true. But the thing is, the greater danger is hoarding your wealth, which is actually more common. So because it's more common, it would be a greater danger. Whereas if you feel that you're falling into the problem of arrogance, that's something you can treat on a different level. So there are kind of two things. Usually what happens is, like for example, states like anger, right? Anger is considered to be generally a bad thing, right? But technically anger is not a bad thing. It's excessive anger and being out of control that's the problem. There are some people who have too little anger, meaning nothing angers them at all, such that they see anything happen in front of them, they're passive, they won't do anything about it. So they're on the opposite side. But why is anger seen as a bad trait? Because most people will fall in this extreme. That's why it's seen generally as this trait. That's why it says generally the giving hand is always going to be better than the receiving hand, because that's where most people will fall into. Although you're right, it could be the opposite sometimes. The Prophet ﷺ said, now it's about community and authority. The Prophet ﷺ said, a believer in respect of another believer is like a building whose parts support one another. With an example of all the believers, it's like one giant building, and every part supports one another. So other believers, meaning everyone who follows Islam. The other parts, now the thing is, a building without proper supports, without the walls, without some pillars, let's say it's a very big building or something, it's going to collapse if it doesn't have a support. So the same thing with believers. Every believer should help other believers, in everything that they possibly can, right? Because we need to support one another. So that's an example which shows you, if you want Islam to be strong and the Muslim community to be strong, everyone should support one another. And he gave this beautiful example of a building. You want to keep the building up, you want to keep the building strong, everyone has to do their part in supporting that building. If you got some weak links, that part of the building is going to be weak. If everyone is weak, the building foundation is just it's gonna fall down because there's no foundation there. Okay? So that's about the importance of community. The importance of helping and supporting the Muslim community. Okay? Let's move on to the next hadith. The likeness of the believers in their mutual love, mercy, and affection is that of the body. So the love that you have for your brothers, the mercy that you have, the affection that you have for your brothers and sisters is like the human body. When one limb of it complains, the rest of the body reacts with sleeplessness and fever. So it's like, imagine you got the flu, or like you got some pain or some cold or something, and it's really hurting you over here. Every part of your body is being affected in some way because there's some illness in your body. So if there's some believer who's suffering somewhere, some group of Muslims somewhere in a remote place, whatever it is, they're suffering, we should be feeling that pain. And we should be trying to help them. Not just feeling, because sometimes we're just feeling pain all the time. But we should try to help them and alleviate the difficulty that they're going through. This is something which is very important, because this gives us a sense of community as a ummah throughout the world. Anywhere there's a Muslim brother or Muslim sister that's going through some difficulty, we should feel that. And we should try to do something about it. So it's like part of our body. One side hurts, the entire body feels the pain. Your foot starts hurting, your body's feeling it. You're messed up, right? Your whole body gets affected because you're feeling the pain everywhere. Same thing applies. Okay? The same thing applies. Any questions on that? It's pretty clear. The next one is about authority. A few more, we'll just go 5 minutes over, I apologize, but we'll finish this. Authority is very, very important because we have a problem, we have a crisis of authority in Islam today, in most Muslim communities. So here's importance, this is how important authority is. The Prophet ﷺ said, when 3 people set out on a journey, they should appoint one of them as the leader. This is a teaching. When 3 people or more set out on a journey, they should appoint one of them as a leader. Now it says 3 or more, perhaps even 2, you should assign a leader as well. 2, generally you won't have as many issues, but maybe even 2, but at least 3, right? Make one of them a leader. When they set out on a journey, now is this only talking about journeys? No. It's talking about any type of, endeavor or any type of, thing you're doing which requires some kind of leadership. Because people might dispute, people might get into an issue over something, say, which way do we go? Just a journey, imagine. I think we should go the scenic route. We should go, the beach route. That takes too long, we should go the other way. No, I think we should go this way. You can't decide, people are going to get upset, if you appointed one of them as a leader, one of them is going to make the final decision, then that's it. The leader has made the decision, it's done. We're not going to have a problem anymore. So you have leadership there. And it says, appoint one of them, right? Now when do you appoint the leader? Obviously you appoint the leader before you set out on the journey. If you already get into a fight and you say, okay, we're going to appoint one of you as leader, it's not going to work, right? At the last minute. I mean, maybe it could, but it's not the best way. So that there's going to be more order and there's going to be less disputes. And you should do this for everything. Every major project, you get together and there's like 5 people undertaking some project, you should appoint a leader. See, this person is the leader of the group. The leader's job is to consult, to ask and everything, but the leader exercises their authority when there's going to be an issue. Now this is that happens in so many things. People undertake some project, people do some kind of community work, whatever it is, but they didn't appoint a leader. We need to make this, we need to revive this sunnah. We need to revive, this is actual sunnah. Okay? The Prophet ﷺ, he was of course the leader, so technically he never appointed, he did appoint other leaders as well, but this is something that we need to really revive, because it will solve so many disputes that we're actually having, Any questions on that? So scholars differ whether it's mandatory or whether it's highly, highly recommended. Either way, we should be doing it. Right? Either way, we should be doing it. The Prophet ﷺ said, I command you to be fearful of Allah and to hear and obey. Hear and obey meaning your leader. Even if an African slave is put in command over you. Okay, what does that mean? It means that he knew that Arabs were racist people. And they were racist against anyone who was not from their own tribe. But they also had a level of racism against the African people. Now it's not just because they're black, because they weren't like white supremacists and all that. There were other reasons why they had, because they were not like super white or bleached or something like that. The reason why also has to do with because the Abyssinians had actually taken over Yemen. If you're in the Islamic history class, you understand. And there were some other relations and all of that. So they were racist against the Romans. They were racist against they were equal opportunity racists, right? But one of the racism that they had a racism against Abyssinians, and a lot of the slaves happened to be from Africa. So the slave is viewed as the lowest person. There weren't as many slaves from Rome or from Persia. Why? Because they're empires. So it's not likely that you're going to capture any of their people because they're powerful empires. They keep their own slaves. So basically he's talking to them and saying, even the person who you may dislike the most, if he's put in authority over you, you still have to listen to him. So it says to hear and obey, meaning hear and obey the leader as long as it's, there's a fear of Allah that's there. He's acting in accordance with what Allah is saying. African slave was considered to be a lower status. Racism was prevalent in the Arabian society. Basically what the Prophet is saying, even if you dislike the person who's been put in charge of you, and you dislike them so much, you don't think they're qualified to be a leader, but they are the leader, and they're not going against what Islam has said, you follow their judgment. So if they say, you know what, we're going to take the scenic route, or we're going to take this route, don't say, man, you know who you are, this and that. You have to follow that person. Why? Because it's going to lead to order in the community. That's how important authority is. So the important thing is, he says, even if an African slave is put in command over you. What does put in command mean? It means someone who's been put in command through a legitimate process. Now, what is legitimate process? That's something that we're going to cover probably in the third quarter. But the thing is, this doesn't mean that all of a sudden you have some dictator in country X who's usurped power or was put in there by like some, some Western powers, and he's like a puppet that's kind of like just sitting there, and all of a sudden you come up with this hadith and say, even if it's an African slave, we have to listen to this guy. No, that's not, meaning through a legitimate process. Now, what is Islamically legitimate process? That's a long discussion. But if someone is the recognized leader, then you have to follow. If he's just some random guy who's taken over power and sitting in the corner or something, and he killed off everyone else, that's not the same thing. Just keep that in mind. Any questions on that? Okay. Next hadith. A companion said, we gave the Messenger of Allah our pledge to hear and obey in hardship and ease with regard to both what we liked and what we disliked, even if there was prejudice against us, and not to dispute the authority of those placed over us, and to speak the truth wherever we were, and not to fear in the way of Allah the blame of any critic. We just want to focus on one aspect of the hadith here, and that is, we will not dispute the authority of those people who've been placed over us. Why is that so important? This is the pledge of Aqaba that was taking place. And part of the pledge of Aqaba, when they were accepting Islam, they were told that you don't dispute the authority. Why? Because to avoid anarchy and to avoid sedition. Right? Two things which are very problematic in a society. Sometimes you'll think, okay, we need to overthrow this leader, but not for Islamic reasons, not for reasons that has to be overthrown. What happens is, if this opens the door and says, you know what, any leader you don't like, they're ruling in accordance with what Allah has taught. But you know what, I don't like his decision, and I don't like the way he dresses, and his accent is bad and everything. You convince a bunch of other people and you overthrow him. And then all of a sudden, okay, everything's going good, and all of a sudden no one likes your accent either, all of a sudden they go and overthrow them. What kind of stability will you have in society? Nothing. So the point is, to have a stable society, you need to follow authority. You need to follow proper leadership that's there. And you don't overthrow the leadership unless they're doing something that's against what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has declared. And we'll talk about in the next class, or in the third quarter, inshallah, when you can overthrow a leader and when you can't overthrow a leader. Okay? Inshallah. Any questions on the stuff we covered for today? That's it? Okay, alhamdulillah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to practice these things in our lives. Ameen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum.